When it comes to freaky, what's scarier? The monsters we dream up, or the ones who actually walk among us? Today, we're diving into the lives of 15 real people so bizarre, so twisted, that they make fiction look boring. From bloodthirsty rulers to killer clowns, these aren't just stories. They're the dark truths that make your skin crawl. So get ready, because reality is about to get a whole lot stranger. Number 15. Elizabeth Bathory. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most freakiest of them all? That's Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian noblewoman who made Dracula look like a bedtime story. Known as the Blood Countess, Bathory allegedly lured young peasant girls to her castle with promises of high-paying servant jobs. Once there, these girls met fates so gruesome they'd make horror movies blush. From beatings to freezing victims in the snow, her methods were the stuff of nightmares. But the juiciest legend? Bathory supposedly bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. Talk about an extreme skincare routine. With up to 600 victims, though records suggest a mere 80, her bloodlust went unchecked until she started targeting noblewomen. That's when the jig was up. In 1611, she was sentenced to house arrest, bricked into her own chambers with just a small opening for food. She died 4 years later. Whether fact or folklore, Bathory's name remains infamous, forever linked to blood-soaked myths. Number 14. Jil D. Jil D was a French war hero turned nightmare. Once a celebrated companion of Joan of Arc during the 100 Years' War, Jil became infamous not for his bravery, but for his freaky descent into depravity. In the 1430s, D began abducting, molesting, and murdering young boys who came to his castle. He killed with unimaginable cruelty, from strangling to decapitation, and even indulged in macabre rituals with their remains. By the time the church caught wind of his crimes, D had reportedly murdered as many as 140 children, though some suggest the count could be much higher. His trial in 1440 exposed the full extent of his sadistic acts. He confessed under torture, was sentenced to hanging, and his body was burned for good measure. Some historians believe his story inspired the folktale Bluebeard, a dark parable about wealth, secrets, and murder. Jil D's legacy? A chilling reminder of power's potential to corrupt. Number 13. Tomas de Torquemada. Tomas de Torquemada didn't just bring fire and brimstone to the Spanish Inquisition. He was the fire and brimstone. As Grand Inquisitor from 1483 to 1498, he turned Spain into a horror show for heretics, Jews, Muslims, and anyone who didn't fit his vision of religious purity. Under his reign, thousands faced gruesome torture to extract confessions. Strapado, where victims were hung by their wrists until their shoulders dislocated, was a favorite. Waterboarding and stretching on the rack were also common, proving Torquemada was as creative as he was cruel. But torture wasn't enough. He expelled thousands from Spain, believing their mere presence tainted the country's spiritual purity. Those who converted faced constant surveillance, with secret faith practices punishable by death. By the time Torquemada's 15-year reign ended, roughly 2,000 people had been burned, beheaded, or otherwise executed. History remembers him as a dark symbol of fanaticism, wielding religion as a weapon of terror. All right, now let's talk about Number 12. Wang. Wang was a living hellboy, or at least he could have been if he hadn't vanished into thin air. In 1930s Manchuria, a photo emerged of a man with a literal 13-inch horn growing from his head. An ambitious banker spotted Wang and captured his image, sending it to Robert Ripley, who was eager to feature him in his auditorium. But here's the twist. Wang disappeared, leaving behind nothing but that one photograph. Ripley's money couldn't lure him out of hiding, and Wang's story became one of the great sideshow mysteries. Was he overwhelmed by the idea of fame? Did he simply prefer a quiet life over being ogled like a museum exhibit? We'll never know. Wang's brief moment in history remains as enigmatic as the man himself, a unicorn sighting in the truest sense, leaving us to wonder what could have been if he had stepped into the spotlight. Number 11. Jack the Ripper. Ladies of Whitechapel, beware. That was the unspoken warning in 1888 as an unidentified killer terrorized London's East End. Jack the Ripper, as he would famously be called, prowled the streets, luring women, mostly prostitutes, into dark alleys before slitting their throats and mutilating their bodies. For 3 chilling months, the Ripper painted Whitechapel red, claiming at least 5 lives, the canonical 5. His knowledge of anatomy suggested he might have been a surgeon or butcher, but Victorian police were stumped. Eyewitness accounts were as murky as London's fog, and after November 9th, the Ripper vanished, leaving behind a string of grotesque mysteries. Over 100 suspects have been floated since the case was closed in 1892, spawning an entire field called Ripperology. Was he a deranged doctor? A royal gone rogue? We'll never know. But one thing's certain, Jack the Ripper's reign of terror continues to fascinate. But if you watch the record of Ragnarok, well, he was not bad at all, but who he was real or not. Number 10. The Pig-Faced Lady. The idea of a pig-faced lady might sound absurd today, but in 17th century England, it was all the rage. By the winter of 1814 to 1815, London was buzzing with rumors of a noblewoman whose face resembled that of a pig. Newspapers claimed eyewitnesses had seen her, and the public couldn't get enough of this bizarre tale. Circuses, always eager to cash in on a good story, began advertising their own pig-faced ladies. The worst offender? A fair in the 1850s that proudly showcased a drunken, shaved bear dressed in women's clothing. Well, that was crazy. We mean how someone can shave a bear, while every pig-faced lady turned out to be a hoax. But the fascination didn't fade quickly. Some historians think the rumors were inspired by misunderstandings about genetic disorders or a cruel joke that spiraled out of control. Either way, the pig-faced lady remains a strange footnote in England's history of bizarre curiosities. Number 9. Vlad the Impaler. If medieval nightmares had a name, it would be Vlad III Dracula, better known as Vlad the Impaler. This 15th century ruler of Wallachia wasn't just a warlord, he was a one-man horror story. Vlad's military prowess earned him respect, but his barbaric cruelty made him infamous. His favorite pastime? Impaling people on wooden stakes and leaving them to die in agonizing slow motion. After defeating the Ottoman Turks in battle, Vlad left a forest of 20,000 impaled corpses along the Danube River. When reinforcements arrived, they turned back immediately, because who wants to fight someone who uses human bodies as garden decorations? Vlad's appetite for blood was so notorious that he reportedly dipped his bread in the blood of his victims while dining among the impaled. His macabre reputation, along with his Transylvanian roots, inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula. Vlad didn't suck blood like the Count, but he sure knew how to make history shudder. Number 8. Rasputin. Rasputin wasn't just a man, he was a walking enigma wrapped in scandal. This so-called holy man started as a peasant, preaching salvation through sin. Yes, you read that right. By the early 1900s, Rasputin had slithered his way into Russia's royal court, charming Tsarina Alexandra with his supposed healing powers for her hemophiliac son. But Rasputin's influence wasn't just spiritual, it was scandalous. He appointed corrupt officials by day and partied with prostitutes by night. Known for humiliating aristocrats, he reportedly made high society women lick soup off his fingers. Classy. In 1916, fed-up nobles decided Rasputin had to go. They poisoned him with cyanide, but he survived. They shot him. He didn't die. Finally, they beat him, tied him up, and tossed him into the freezing Neva River. Even in death, Rasputin refused to be boring. His chaotic life and death symbolized the downfall of the Romanovs and the chaos of pre-revolutionary Russia. Number 7. Adolf Hitler. Hitler's intentions weren't good, but his rise to power proved how far ambition, propaganda, and unchecked hatred can go. Adolf Hitler turned 1930s Germany into his personal dystopian experiment. While he promised prosperity and national pride, what he delivered was terror, genocide, and World War II. Under his reign, 6 million Jews and countless others deemed undesirable were systematically slaughtered. Hitler didn't just invade nations, he invaded the minds of an entire population, convincing them to embrace his twisted vision of a pure race. His infamy stems not just from the scale of his crimes, but from the cold efficiency with which they were executed. By the time he died in 1945, his dream of dominance had left the world in ruins. Hitler's life is a grim reminder of how unchecked power and hatred can destroy everything in their path, and why humanity must never forget the lessons of his reign. All right, let's move to number 6. John Wayne Gacy. Think clowns are creepy? Thank John Wayne Gacy for that. By day, Gacy was a community man, throwing block parties and dressing as Pogo the Clown to entertain kids. But by night, he was a predator with a crawl space full of secrets, literally. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured young men into his home with promises of jobs or just a beer. Once inside, his victims were tied up, strangled, and buried under his house. Oh, and if that wasn't twisted enough, Gacy was proud of his magic tricks that left his victims helpless. When authorities uncovered the truth, they found the remains of 29 victims under his home and more scattered elsewhere. Gacy wasn't just a killer. He was a master manipulator who smiled in court and claimed innocence. If you ever needed a reason to side-eye a clown, Gacy gave you plenty. And that's why we don't like or love clowns. Number 5. Maximillian de Robespierre. Power corrupts. If you need proof, look no further than Maximillian de Robespierre, the French Revolution's poster boy turned public enemy. A lawyer and politician with a flair for fiery speeches, Robespierre inspired crowds with his passion for liberty and justice. But once he climbed the ladder of power, he transformed into a tyrant whose favorite tool wasn't a pen, it was a guillotine. During the infamous Reign of Terror, Robespierre sentenced thousands to death, many without trial. Friends, foes, family, it didn't matter. If you blinked the wrong way, off went your head. By 1794, with nearly 40,000 executions under his belt, Robespierre finally met his own end, via his beloved guillotine, no less. The irony? He once championed civil rights and freedom. Robespierre's story is a dark reminder of how idealism can spiral into fanaticism. His legacy isn't liberty, fraternity, or equality. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when power gets a little too cozy with paranoia. And in reality, he was one of the freakiest people ever walked on Earth. Number 4. Lazarus and Joanns Baptista Colorado. The Colorado brothers were 17th century Europe's most famous conjoined twins, achieving a level of celebrity that even TikTok stars would envy. Lazarus was fully functional and even fathered children, while his brother Joannes Baptista, a parasitic twin, protruded from his torso and remained immobile and nonverbal. Lazarus toured Europe, performing for royals like King Charles I and Queen Henrietta, draped in cloaks when Joannes wasn't on display. Their fame brought wealth, but their story took a bizarre turn when Lazarus killed a man during a heated argument. A court declared him innocent, not because he didn't commit the crime, but because executing Lazarus would unfairly kill Joanns, who hadn't done anything wrong. Despite their unusual circumstances, the Colorado twins became a lasting part of history, showing that even the strangest situations can lead to fame, fortune, and a few jaw-dropping twists of fate. They weren't freaks at all. Number 3. Albert Fish. If nightmares had a mascot, Albert Fish would wear the crown. Nicknamed the Gray Man and the Boogeyman, Fish was no ordinary killer. He was a walking horror story. This unassuming old man preyed on children, luring them with false kindness before committing acts so vile they were hard to stomach. Fish wasn't just a murderer. He was a cannibal who sent letters to victims' families detailing his crimes. Yes, he literally wrote, "I ate your child." If that doesn't make your skin crawl, how about his other hobby, sticking needles into his own body for fun? Even hardened detectives were rattled by Fish's confessions. His crimes weren't just brutal, they were methodical, calculating, and disturbingly sadistic. He turned everyday trust into terror, earning his place as one of history's most revolting killers. Fish wasn't just the stuff of horror stories, he was the real-life reason parents checked under the bed. He was freaky, isn't he? Number 2. Grady Styles. Grady Styles, better known as the Lobster Boy, had a life story that was as shocking as his appearance. Born with ectrodactyly, a condition that fused his hands and feet into claw-like shapes, Grady was the 6th generation in his family to inherit it. His father, already a circus performer, introduced him to sideshow life at an early age. But Grady's fame masked a darker side. As an abusive alcoholic, he murdered his daughter's fiancé in 1978, but escaped prison due to his condition, receiving only probation. Karma struck in 1992 when his wife and stepson hired a hitman to end his reign of terror. Grady was shot 3 times while watching TV, a grim end to a deeply troubled life. Number 1. H. Holmes, America's first serial killer. H. Holmes wasn't just a killer, he was a diabolical architect of murder. Born Herman W. Mudgett, Holmes built his infamous murder castle in Chicago during the 1893 World's Fair, a 3-story house of horrors disguised as an inn. The castle was a labyrinth of terror. Hidden peepholes, trapdoors, gas chambers, and secret passages filled the structure. A greased chute led to the basement, where Holmes kept a furnace, a surgical table, and a medieval rack. His victims, mostly young women, were asphyxiated with gas before being subjected to gruesome experiments. Some were incinerated, while others were skinned, their skeletons sold to medical schools. Though convicted of 4 murders, Holmes confessed to 27 and is suspected of killing far more. His castle, set to become a museum, mysteriously burned down before it opened. Holmes was hanged in 1896, but his chilling legacy as America's first documented serial killer lives on, a twisted blueprint for horror stories to come. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. See you in the next one. See you in the next one.